Hello,
Speed
everyone, and
sound.
welcome to YouTube.
What? You were meant to count in.
I did count in. I just didn't press the record button until after, because one of these days we're going to get an intro, right? One of these days. Hi, everyone. I screwed up again. This time we are talking about backrooms and backstabbing. Yay! Why are secret deals normal for parliamentarians? Why is that so prevalent? Horse, take it away.
I've got Britney Spears in my head now, Oops, I did it again. Yeah, no, okay, so we've got a lot of mileage out of John Barilaro.
Yes.
Yes,
I mean, I
John
think everyone
Barilaro.
has at
I
this
was
point.
trying to call him Dom Barilaro for some point because
I mean, look, in terms of like political action, the results, like in terms of political results from government, they're very similar. In my
Look,
opinion.
what John Barilaro chooses to engage in the privacy of his own bedroom is not something that I care to speculate on, nor is it any of my business. What he tried to do to the state of New South Wales, on the other hand, very much my business.
Tried to do.
He didn't get all the way there. Anyway, the thing is though that there has been a lot of mileage from John Barilaro's alleged misdeeds. We have footage of Gladys Berejiklian in 2020 explaining that the term pork barreling was an existing what was the exact phrasing she used? Is in the common parlance was the exact phrase she used, which is a very, very wanky way of saying, oh, everybody knows what it means. Everybody does it. John Barilaro has perhaps
Did you get the feeling that she was like saying, get over it, it happens all the time? I kind of got that feeling from it.
That's
it's like,
sort of what I'm getting at. John Barilaro drew a lot of hate, ultimately because journalist and sometimes comedian Jordan Shanks decided that he was a good target, a weak point to hit the state government in, and a good thin end of the wedge for exposing corruption that was ultimately structural. Now you have to ask, how does a man like John Barilaro do all these things if they are so unconscionable? How is he heard later laughing about it with his colleagues? Surely they must also consider that this is wrong, right? Surely they'd be outraged. Except the problem is that a certain amount of corruption has been normalized. And that is now what we're going to have to handle. It's not just John Barilaro. It's not just Gladys Berejiklian. It's not just Scott Morrison. Sorry, it's been long enough since I heard his name, since he was relevant to my life, that I just forgot who he was for a moment. It's not any one of these
sweet
people.
Ignorant bliss there.
It's a system which encourages corruption, which encourages the misuse of resources, which encourages underhanded deals, which encourages politics within politics within politics. Case any of you remember us having Kevin Rudd and then Julia Gillard and then Kevin Rudd for a bit there. We have a system.
Not only do you have to do backroom
actively
deals
rewarded.
Parties, not only do you have to do backroom deals to get between parties to get things through Parliament, but even between factions within parties.
So how did it get so rotten? Why is this normal?
Well, so looking at the causes of this corruption, I'd say that it's twofold. First, let's tackle the first layer. Why is there backroom deals needed for between parties in order to get things through? Why does it all have to be done in the dark? I think that is in large part due to the fact that increasingly political parties themselves are at the center of our politics. There was once upon a time a situation in Parliament where you had three parties, none of which were in a coalition with each other, all of whom were about equal in terms of numbers in Parliament. We had a more...
Three houses alike in dignity in fair Parliament where we lay our scene.
Yes. And so that was, in that day, it was very much, you could have the discussion itself on the parliamentary floor of what to do. It was sort of, in a way, more out in the open. But if you also consider that the media was a lot less developed then, we didn't have as much in terms of regular television. In fact,
parliamentary privilege also existed at the time. There was still the ability to do things without exposing all of it to the public.
Yeah. And so, there's in part, like, there was both more and less transparency. But at the same time, it was less, like, the structure was kind of there and it was less directly observed. And therefore, you didn't have to hide as much as a parliamentarian. And at the same time, that has shifted due to now Parliament question time and, basically anything from Parliament being available online moments after it happens. You also have parties themselves being very much at the center of Australian political thought and discussion.
Now, see, I think there's actually something different going on here that maybe you haven't necessarily considered here. Like, the party divide is very real, and we must consider it as a real force here. We may recall from the sort of election lead up that I said I was voting for a person, not a party. And I'm going to play back into that a little bit. I think one of the other things that we're seeing is that back in my day, there was a certain amount of trust. It was understood that someone in a position of office had a responsibility that they would do their best to discharge. I'm not going to suggest that maybe we shouldn't call members of Parliament the Honourable these days, but it is sort of what I'm driving at. We didn't need continual exposure because, to a certain extent, in times past, we could trust that the person that we voted for would do what we voted for, them to do for us. If it came out, let's say that you are the Informed Medical Options Party, who thankfully has 0 seats anywhere, so I'm safe to take the piss out of them right now. And let's say that you want to make a deal for, like, getting a massive amount of funding into public schools. Like, this is something that is objectively absolutely correct to do, absolutely morally unassailable. The only catch is that they're not going to admit anti-vaxxers. No jab, no play. Hey, what are you going to do? Are you going to die on your little hill? Or are you going to make a compromise and say, look, this isn't ideal, but what sort of monster doesn't want to give our kids every opportunity? But for the core of supporters of such a party, for this to come out would be devastating. And so this deal has to be done in the dark, otherwise they lose their electorate support, and the voter goes, screw them, they're just as bad as the other bastards. Because that trust doesn't exist. That trust has been broken institutionally.
Yeah, a question on that. So I'm now wondering so is that a problem of the expectations on the part of the voter that the party does not compromise? or is it a problem with the elected representatives, or both? I think maybe both.
I'd say it's both.
Because
Out in the electorate, you have radicalization, shall we say, almost.
If I could here, because I think I might have just gotten the answer in my head, because I think it's both, because on one end, the voters are continually having unrealistic expectations, and they're not actually giving it enough thought. And
I mean, that's what happens when you read Murdoch rags, yeah.
Well, yes, there's that as well, but also on the other end, essentially, for lack of a better term, for lack of a better analogy, I'll use this. The voters are engaging in politics in a similar manner that a child might engage in politics. They're having unrealistic expectations, and they are not taking the time needed to understand things, understand the situation, understand the issues themselves, understand, what can reasonably be done. But at the same time, the politicians themselves, the parliamentarians, they are not actively trying to treat us any better than children. So it becomes this horrible feedback loop, whereas the voters act like children, the politicians treat them like children more and more, and then it comes back to, well, if you treat someone like a child, they start to act more like a child, and so it just keeps going in that one loop.
If any of you have a degree in dev psych, please leave comments. Sorry, that's
developmental psychology.
Like that's a really loaded train of logic, I guess, because how we actually treat children, or how it meant to treat children, is ideally to give them like just enough rope to not hang themselves. We're meant to have them be able to make small mistakes and learn from those small mistakes, so that they can develop competence, so that they can become better humans as they grow. As
Jordan Peterson,
I feel like that's
said,
sort of
this is a good one. I know that Jordan Peterson's like very controversial, but here's one thing that I heard that I thought was very interesting.
As Jordan Peterson once said, children are like lobsters. They have layers.
I don't remember that one, but what I do remember is him saying that children need to be allowed to do dangerous things safely.
Yes.
In order to develop.
Is absolutely it.
And that, I think in that regard, can we apply that train of logic to politics? That people need to be like,
I think politicians have been doing dangerous things safely for far too long. But in terms of the voting populace, I think that instead of fearing that too much information will overwhelm them, we need to trust that they will be able to function to their level of absorbing that information and make the right choices for themselves and their communities going forward. And that is the other half of this trust, is that politicians don't trust that the public can do the right thing. Yeah. And that lack of trust, much like the lack of trust in elected officials, is not entirely undeserved, because the information that the voting public is given is incomplete at best and actively misleading at worst. How could you possibly make the right decisions when you're being fed shovel after shovel of shit?
True. And sorry, there was one thing that you said then, and it prompted an interesting thought, but I kept listening to the rest, and now I'm forgetting it. Repeat the middle part again.
That the trust has been broken in both directions, because people can't be trusted to absorb all of this information.
Right. I don't know. I remember what it is now. Okay. But you were saying that you briefly mentioned there that that they should be getting all the information and that they should be trusted to adapt to the level of information that they're given. Essentially,
Yes.
I'm kind of paraphrasing you, but it's kind of like climbing a mountain. You don't know you can climb a mountain until you actually do it. You know,
Yes, but on the other hand, every corpse on
to
Everest,
meet that.
every
Well,
corpse
yes.
on Everest was once a very motivated person.
True, but I'm not assuming everyone's going to climb Everest as their first, metaphorical mountain. But I'm thinking that we should trust that people, if like we should trust that people will rise to meet the challenge that is needed of them instead of coddling. God, I got this whole thing in my head of it's like a parents. You know how there's been all that discussion of like helicopter parents and now like what's being called bulldozer parents, and I'm just like, let them eat dirt.
It's good for their immune system.
I mean,
eat the child for their health within a certain amount. No, I'm serious. Okay, so when you have a baby
I get
and
what
you
you're saying, and I agree.
you hold them and you fly them around like an aircraft in the air, you're still holding them.
Yeah.
You're not actually just throwing them across the room. But
but you're letting
all
them
of that
experience
motion,
the
it's good for their
G-forces.
development.
Yeah,
well,
you're letting them experience the G-forces.
Yeah, but it's also developmentally really important. If we don't do that, we have kids who develop balance disorders.
That's a thing.
Yeah.
I
know a person who literally falls over if he doesn't keep walking, or unless he's leaning against something. Yeah, it's a
interesting.
Thing.
Yeah, I've never I've kind of heard of like certain, as a tangential effect, certain brain disorders that usually through like a head trauma or something. But I've never heard of like a developmental disorder leading to that. That's interesting. But anyway, kind of unrelated to what we're talking about. So
eat the voting electorate for their health.
Yes. Yes. You know what? I think even though we haven't run over time yet, which is amazing for us, maybe we'll end it there, as that's a really good note to end it on. Yeet them, and the voting public of Australia will rise to meet the challenge.
Yeet early and yeet often.
Take care, everyone.